Ladies and gentlemen and ladies, ladies and gents, we are in some trouble. Now, it's not what I'm showing you here that's the problem. It's not this either. It's not none of this. What we're going to do is I'm going to let Dave talk to you guys. He's going to be reading from the March 9th, 1933 Act. And Dave is going to talk, and then I'm going to interrupt him and tell you guys to go ahead. And now I'm going to prove to you that this came directly from the Act. All I did was put it in my PDF exchange. It's not this one. It's this one. And nope, it's not this one. That's a different Act. I'll show you that one in a minute as well. It's this Act. Get out of here. And from this Act, we're going to start. Got to go back down to that section. Sorry. Hold on. Section 401. I was looking for that section because that's the section that was the focus. So right here, you'll see it says, shall be deposited with the Treasury of the United States and so forth under the Federal Reserve Act obligations. So watch this. Which reads, upon deposit with the United States Treasury and so forth under the Federal Reserve Act obligations. So I just copied and paste. It was painstaking. Dave, would you go ahead and get us started?
The last section of the bill provides for the issuance of a new money. I am a little at a loss, in the hurried way I have had to read the bill, to understand just how this new money is to be handled. I refer to Section 401, which reads, upon deposit with the Treasurer or the United States of all contract, obligations of the United States, or any notes and so forth. Under the Federal Reserve Act, obligations that are deposited as the security and gold for reserve notes are placed in the hands of the Federal Reserve agent. I would like to ask the chairman of the committee if this is a plan to change the holding of the security back of Federal Reserve notes to the Treasury of the United States rather than the Federal Reserve agent. Mr. Stegall. This provision is for the issuance of Federal Reserve Bank notes, not for Federal Reserve notes, and the security back of it is the obligations, notes, drafts, bills of exchange, bank acceptances, outlined in the section to which the gentleman has referred, Mr. McFadden. Then the new circulation is to be Federal Reserve Bank notes and not Federal Reserve notes? Is that true? Mr. Stegall. Insofar as the provisions of this section are concerned, yes. Mr. McFadden. I would like to ask the gentleman right in that connection, is there any gold reserve to be held as security back of these new Federal Reserve Bank notes? Mr. Stegall. The law provides 5% back of Federal Reserve Bank notes, just as is maintained in case of national bank notes. There have been issued a small amount of these notes, I cannot recall the exact figures. The gentleman is probably more familiar with it than I am. There is only a little of that currency outstanding. This contemplates a substantial addition to it. It is a liberalization of currency issue, to take care of banks in their efforts to respond to the demands of business and liability to their depositors. Mr. McFadden. The current press reports indicate there will be issued under this authority some $2 million or more of new currency, and made available to the banks. Is that correct? Sometime later under the bill a percentage of the banks...
Okay, pay attention. The reason why it says sometime later, because it's later in the discussion. We're going to go to that sometime later so that you guys will be able to see that information later. So I just need, pay attention, need for you all to follow me. I'm very, very, very tired. I'm about to go to sleep. It's only 7:57, but I was tired, people. Did that 3-hour walking yesterday. I can't be walking for no 3 hours. It was 98 degrees, and I didn't know it was 98 degrees. If I had known it was 98 degrees, oh Lord, I never would have been able to complete that walk. I need to walk. So I decided to walk yesterday to the post office, which was 3.5 miles away. And I ended up going in the wrong direction, and when I went in the wrong direction, I did go in the wrong direction. I had to walk back the opposite way because the streets were dead ending, and I just got trapped and lost. And anyway, it was a long day, so it taxed me. With that being said, I was watching a Yusuf L video, and the Yusuf L video that I was watching, all right people, get out of here. The Yusuf L video that I was watching, ladies and gentlemen, was talking about the exact title is the United States Bankruptcy and the Trading with the Enemy Act. And basically, most of the information that was being covered was the same information that I had covered previously in a similar video. But he actually had the statements from Congress and he was actually reading it. And that was perfect because it mentioned a couple of things that caught my attention. However, in pulling up this act tonight, and I decided to pull it up because it's just PDF. PDF Exchange allows me to click here, select text, and I'm able to select text. And I'm grateful that I'm able to do that because I can copy and paste the text from the actual congressional record. Let me let you all know what's the title of this congressional record so that you'll understand. Congressional record, 73rd Congress, first session, March 9th, 1933, the Thursday of that particular month. Now, I'm just going to go and I'm going to suggest when you get it, 17, I'm going to go to page 17. Now, this is Mr. Glass. Stegall talked earlier, but this is Glass. He's talking. You heard of the Glass-Steagall Act, right? That's where they come from, y'all. Just so you know. Now, I want you to pay attention. Undoubtedly, doubtably, but dutably, that's why you hear him say undoubtedly, undoubtedly, anyway, under two provisions of the bill, and it will come in large degree. An outstanding provision of the bill is that dealing with the issuance of new currency. Senators will understand that there are two different kinds of Federal Reserve notes. You guys don't understand that. Federal Reserve notes are required to be buttressed. Oh, what's a buttress? Go ask your butler. With 40% gold reserves. But there is what the Act calls a Federal Reserve banknote, which requires no reserves whatsoever. It is on a par with national banknotes. It is secured by bonds of the United States, and we have authorized in this bill the issuance of some billions of dollars of Federal Reserve banknotes to relieve the situation. Excuse me? What are we doing? This is what he's asking. What are we doing? This doesn't make no sense, so I want you guys to pay attention to this conversation. But it does not require any gold basis. It does not require any gold basis. Therefore, it is not a drain upon the gold reserves, so far as the gold reserves are concerned. I am coming to have less and less respect for a gold reserve which cannot be used when it is needed to relieve the country. What is as a reserve? It is a sum of money retained in the banks to meet emergencies. And yet, when an emergency arises, a banker will tell us he cannot use his reserves except under penalty. The Federal Reserve Board is authorized by law to suspend all reserves for a period of 90 days, and then for an additional period of 90 days, covering a period of 6 months. I have been urging them for 6 months to make a suspension, and they did it just 3 and 4 days ago. There is talk about closing the state banks. Oh, they were very highly upset about this shutting down the state banks, y'all. The senator from Pennsylvania has the correct idea. There is not a state bank in a state of this union which will not be privileged to open tomorrow morning if it wants to do so. The state banks weren't affected. Under state authority is how they would operate, not under federal authority. And there is nothing that the President of the United States or the Congress of the United States can do to prevent it. The banks could have opened anytime they wanted, is what he's saying. And because they are state-owned banks, the federal government had no jurisdiction. They do now because of the passing of this act. There may be proclamations made, and some of us are disposed to think that most of these proclamations have been invalid and are unconstitutional. Ladies and gentlemen, all of the proclamations were invalid. The president declaring a national emergency, Congress gave him the authority to declare a national emergency, and he did have that authority. But to declare a national banking holiday, which covered the banks of the state, no, he did not have the authority. Now, Congress regulates currency. They regulate the money, but he did not have the authority to suspend the people's rights to engage in banking. I want you to hold on. This video is a whole lot more than what you think. Okay? Congress did not have the authority to delegate their authority to another branch of government. Doesn't matter if it was an agency, doesn't matter if it was this, doesn't matter if it was that. Separation of powers is succinct. It is separation of powers. Two powers cannot join together because that gives them a supermajority. You cannot have a supermajority in government. Not the way this Constitution was set up. So let's continue. Mr. Vandenberg, Mr. President, will the senator yield? I yield. Mr. Glass, why you yielding? See, Glass is sitting up there saying, what y'all doing? What the y'all think y'all doing? And you see somebody wants to stop him from challenging this. So Mr. Vandenberg says the senator used a figure a short time ago, which I wish he might repeat and amplify. He made some reference to the fact that under this bill, 64% of the Federal Reserve member banks' resources would be released tomorrow. Was that the senator's statement? Mr. Glass says the banks will be opened, which represents approximately 64% of the banking resources of the system. Mr. Vandenberg, does that indicate then that the comptroller already has made a rule under which he proposed to open the banks? Sorry, can't do it that way. I gotta scroll down. I haven't read this section yet, so I don't even know where we're going, y'all. We're going to stop at Mr. Glass's statement when he says not allowed to be open. We're going to stop there. Then you guys can go ahead and read it. Mr. Glass says it indicates that the comptroller of the currency is accurately informed as to this class of banks and will issue a blanket order right away. Mr. Vandenberg says, is it known precisely what banks will open and what banks will not open under the terms of the measure? Mr. Glass, the whole body of banks which comes within the classification I have indicated will be reopened. And very shortly, promptly, we are assured by the comptroller of the currency that larger body of banks with somewhat impaired capital structure will be open very likely within a few days, and only those banks which are literally rotten and which ought not to have been permitted to fall long ago will not be allowed to be open. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what was going on. This is what the whole debate was. They went from 12:30 to 8:30. So they talked well over 9 hours. It took 9 hours for them to pass this bill, which was read 3 times on the floor. There were a lot of things, a lot of procedural issues that they did not take care of when doing this bill. They did not have a roll call, even though it was requested 3 different times. That's why you now have the fact that they get to do these filibusters to prevent stuff like this from happening, but it's too late because they gave their broad executive powers to another branch of government. Now, while going over this, I decided to, because it said something about Section 401. So I pulled up this act, March 24th, 1933. It's the Federal Reserve Bank section that was amended. So it was Section 402 and Section 401. So Section 402, 401, you're going to find this interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because I found it interesting. Let's find out qualifications as a financial institution. Pay attention, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm just going to give you the information. I told you, Presidential Proclamation 2039 says that you are a banking institution. Pay attention. A person, not a corporation, a person qualifies as a financial institution for the purposes of Section 401 through 407. Learn these sections. 401 to 407, that's what I focused on, you see. It's 12 U.S.C. 4401. Just go to 12 U.S.C. 4401 and you'll pull up 4401 through 4407. Pay attention. Of the Act, Federal Reserve Act, if it represents that it, the person, engages in financial contracts as a counterparty on both sides of one or more financial markets and either had one or more financial contracts of a total gross dollar value of at least 1 billion in national principal amount outstanding on any day during the previous 15-month period, with counterparties that are not of its affiliates, or had total gross mark to market positions of at least 100 million aggregated across counterparties in one or more financial contracts on any day during the previous 15-month period, with counterparties that are not its affiliates. If a person qualifies as a financial institution under paragraph A, that person will be considered a financial institution for the purpose of any contracts entered into during the period it qualifies, even if the person any contract entered into during the period it qualified. Get out of my way. See this thing just popping up, getting in my way, letting me know there's somebody trying to do attack on my computer. Anyway, even if the person subsequently fails to qualify. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why the banks need your contract. This is why they act as an intermediary. This is why they act as the trustee, because they need to show that they are a counterparty. If a person qualifies as a financial institution in paragraph A on March 7, 1994, that person will be considered a financial institution for the purpose of any outstanding contracts entered into prior to March 7, 1994. Prior? Richard? No, not that prior. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, findings and purpose. Okay? Meaning a financial institution engaged in daily in thousands of transactions with other financial institutions directly and through clearing organizations such as the courts. I didn't say it, it said it. The efficient processing of such transactions is essential for the smoothly functioning economy. Such transactions can be processed most efficiently if consistent with applicable contractual terms. Obligations among financial institutions are netted. Such netting procedures, ladies and gentlemen, this is telling you exactly how they are operating today. That's the second one I wanted to show you. The third one, we're going to finish reading that March 9, 1933 Act. I'm going to let Dave tell you about it.
Will be able to reopen. They may at once receive from the reserve banks, under Section 401, Federal Reserve notes up to 100% of their holdings of government bonds, regardless of the market price of such bonds, and against commercial paper which they hold in large quantities. Those banks will also profit from a large issue of currency which is soon to be made. On the other hand, the weaker banks of the country, mostly outside of New York City, will either have to close or accept the conditions of the conservators. Appointed by the controller of the currency. I fear that the bill will bring about a reorganization of the banks of the country into group banking units. The terms of such reorganizations must in the nature of things be dictated by the stronger financial interests, which will be able to bargain with the advantage of large liquid resources. The stronger banking interests will be enabled to buy the control of the impaired banks through the acquisition of preferred bank stock, an innovation in banking practice in the United States. Such preferred stock will give the same voting rights as the common stock and will carry no liability on the part of stockholders for future losses. It is moreover provided that the Reconstruction Finance Corporation may purchase in unlimited amounts preferred stock of the reorganized banks and subsequently sell such preferred stock in the open market. These powers will vest in the financial interests of New York a virtual dictatorship over the banking of the entire nation. The financial power and rights so obtained will be obtained with the credit and resources of the United States government. The losers will be prostrate communities and their stockholders and depositors who are deprived of the financial resources of New York and Washington. The new preferred stock issues of banks, a new and, I venture to assert, a dangerous feature in banking, bid fair to be the subject of speculation, manipulation, and abuse by insiders. Through these corporate instruments, the control of banking in the interior can be concentrated in New York through the aid of the federal government, if I read the measure correctly. There can be no proper objection, Mr. President, to the extensive powers proposed for the executive in this emergency, nor can there be any objection to radical measures of assistance to our banks. Let me make it clear that I am not afraid to give power to the executive in this emergency. My objection is that there is not sufficient control in this measure. Once the liquid banks are permitted to open, they are free agents, and, with the printing presses of the Bureau of Printing and Engraving behind them, they will be in a position to buy in the weaker banks at their own price. If I could have my way, I would ensure control by the president of these banks during the emergency. The objection is to giving the financial interests of New York and other centers which have become liquid during the period of this deflation a possible stranglehold on the resources of the country. To selling the banks of the country at marked down prices to interests which will be given money to buy when the rest of the country is penniless. The measures outlined in the bill do not guarantee deposits or sound banking operation. The government places its credit at the command of the strong and, I judge, hopes they will deal wisely and gently by the weak. These messieurs, I fear, will lead to a frittering away of public credit on operations akin to those of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Above all else, we need our credit resources to provide for extraordinary measures, to bring about reemployment and a recreation of purchasing power in the United States. We need to create additional purchasing power by state action. That purchasing power must be used to put men to work and not to enable financial interests in New York to acquire financial power and subsequently hoard money and to absorb the new issues of currency and credit as the banks have done during the entire period of this deflation. I grant that the government must reopen the banks, and it follows that the government should retain control and thus assure that it has opened the banks for public service and not for the possible profits or advantage of the few. The government must mobilize the resources of credit, but if the liability is to be 100% that of the nation, then it should be properly safeguarded so that we might be reassured that 100% of the profits will flow to all the people of the country. The question is on the substitute of the senator from Oklahoma, Mr.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, I was doing the talking. Y'all couldn't hear because I had the mic. Mr. Gore, Al Gore. See, pay attention. These people who you see getting in the office, they ain't new. All right, hold on. Let me explain something to y'all. What I was saying earlier is that these fools are sitting up here telling you that the banks created a monopoly. Isn't that when the Monopoly game was made popular? You better believe it. It came out in the early 1900s, but in 1933, the game Monopoly, whoo, because they started playing with that funny money. And they got to print it up and they got to sit up there and buy all of the stocks of the banks before the stock market opened again. They got to buy all of the stocks of those smaller banks so that they could take over. That's how JP Morgan is where it is now. This is what they did, and this is what they're complaining about. And they're saying all of the profits went to the banks. None of it went to the people of the country. Pay attention. It should be, if the liability is to be 100% of the nation, the nation's full faith and credit is the full liability, then it should be properly safeguarded so that we might be reassured that 100% of the profits will flow to all of the people of the country. But of course, that's not what happened. The people did not get to share in the profits. Hold on. Oh, it stopped. It ain't reading no more. Okay, so he stopped. He said he tied. That's Dave, y'all. Dave don't want to read no more. All right, let's go here. Come on, Dave.
The President pro tempore. The question is on the substitute of the Senator from Oklahoma Mr. Gore for the amendment of the Senator from Louisiana Mr. Long. The amendment to the amendment was rejected. The President pro tempore. The question is on the amendment of the Senator from Louisiana. Mr. Long. I demand the yeas and nays. The President pro tempore. Apparently the demand is not sufficiently seconded. Mr. Long. May I ask that those who favor the yeas and nays shall stand and be counted?
Ladies and gentlemen, this was a setup from day one. Because the President called the special hearing, he had already had his people go around and see. This was a Democratic measure. So for those of you who, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, you knock yourselves out. Think that there's a difference, you keep knocking yourselves out to the point to where you are subconscious and not unconscious. They went around to all the other senators and they threatened them and so on and so forth, or made them, or literally bribe them into casting their vote for this bill. That's why only 17 of them said, no, we're not going with this. Why would you guys do something like this? Because it was stupid to begin with. There was no need for the March 9, 1933 Act. There was not one single need, but it was a, pay attention, power grab. And as they stated throughout the hearings, these are members of Congress saying that this is unconstitutional. As I showed you, they had already stated that the proclamations were unconstitutional. And then you heard them state that they were doing this during a time of peace, that it was not a time of war. So how could they pass such a measure during a time of peace? Because the President declared a national emergency. And they reworded the Trading with the Enemy Act to say that anytime they declare a national emergency, that it didn't have to be during a time of war. You feel me? Alright, I just wanted to share with you guys some of the language from the Trading with the Enemy Act and to be able to let you see exactly a little bit more detail about what was going on with that. Take the time to listen to what they said. You're going to have people talking about, that's that sovereign citizen bull. Okay, and then you just simply say, oh no, here, go right to this site. Now, if you guys are looking for that act, let me show you how to find it. Hold on. Tick, tock, tick, tick, tock. That's me getting ready to yawn because I'm tired, y'all. I'm just tired. Nah, we're going to do a save as. Let's do save as. Save as. Come on now. I ain't got all day. I ain't got all day. Ain't got all day. Been come from Alabama because I ain't got all day. Ain't got all day. Oh, I'm sorry. That's what I do when I'm bored. I just be coming up with stuff. Whew. Yeah, I just wish y'all could know. The Congress finds that many financial institutions engage daily in thousands of transactions with other financial institutions directly and through clearing organizations. This is the actual act that we told you about, the 4401. Okay? So, V, and then we're going to go TEXT. So this is the Congressional Record, March 9, 1933 text. I think, yeah, this is the one I got it from. Now this thing takes like a minute and 20 seconds and you can't turn off the page when you're downloading it, okay? But this is the Congressional Record I got right here from this page right here. It is vdocument.mx. vdocument.mx, Congressional record March 9, 1933, HTML, and congressional record March 9, 1933. There's a hyphen between each succinct digit, meaning word and number. Thank you, everybody. Bringing it to your attention. Hopefully, the information is beneficial. Hopefully, you found it necessary to understand what's being said. So when people tell you that there is currency and that there is money and that there is this thing called cash, no, there isn't. There is the need to perpetuate a system that makes people think that dollar bills are money. That's why the Treasury tells you on their site that dollar bills have no value, they are not redeemable in anything, and they have no backing by anything, and this has been the case since 1933. They say that. We don't say that. We just copy what they say. So this is what I'm going to tell y'all. The next time somebody contradicts what you say, just take the facts and just put them there and then do like I do. Put the web page for the government so that they can go there and read it for themselves. Say, don't argue with me, because that's what I'm getting ready to do. That's what I'm getting ready to do. I'm not playing no games with these ignorant okay? I know what I'm talking about. And so if anybody wants to challenge what I'm talking about, bring it. I've been handling those challenges all my life. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, just wanted to talk to y'all a little bit more about that, what Congress had to say. Okay? There you go. Take care of yourselves. Adios. Goodbye. Sayonara. Compadre.